Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Goodgame. I'm a senior sales engineer with InterSystems. This is Partnering for Success. And really, this is about how we've partnered with different sites. I'm going to introduce these guys here. This is Justin Owens, Scott Roth, and Julio Rodriguez. So they're all from, you have all the information up there. But over the years, I've supported various groups for different types of integrations. And we come across different things that we think could be done better. So we're going to cover today production validator, orphan message purging, and change control audit and alerts. I'm not going to read the slide here to you, but this basically is a set of tools that hopefully make your life a little bit easier. We've had great success with these, and these guys are going to go through them. We're going to show you a demo of each one. So you have 4 engineers, 45 slides roughly, and 3 demos that we're going to try to get done in 45 minutes. So with no further ado, I'm going to let Justin lead this section, production validator. He's been doing this for 4, 5 years?
A couple years now.
Yeah.
So our goal with this was to automate the process for our upgrades so we could validate, do full integrated testing at scale without having to involve all the resources that you would need to involve for normal testing that you do on a day-to-day basis. But when you're doing an upgrade, you don't necessarily want to have to reach out to all the vendors, all the customers, all the upstream systems, all the downstream systems, and involve everyone. You just want to validate that that process is going to work the same that it worked in the current version and in the new version. So our goal was to do that, and originally we started with a file-based solution where you could compare messages, but we've moved to a database solution where now those messages are in the database and they're doing a full diff.
And not to point out the obvious, but when you're doing this manually, when you're going through the upgrade process manually, obviously you're reliant on resources and what's going to actually be tested, and if it's full integrated testing, who's actually validating the results. So you get all these variations.
And you're going to do, along with that, you can't necessarily validate every single field, even if you've got all the vendors involved, all the people involved to send every message type that they could think of. You're only doing one test, one at a time, maybe 2 or 3. We want to be able to do this validation at scale. So when we did this in the past, we originally started this type of process in our Cloverleaf environment where you run messages through the testing tool and you are doing this whole process. And if you have multiple different environments in your Cloverleaf, you have to run those messages multiple times. And I think we spent a ton of time doing that. We had multiple high-level resources involved, and I think we tried to do this for 3 weeks, and we didn't get all the interfaces tested, and I think we had like 5 people involved trying to do it. When we started with the production validator, we moved to a file-based solution where we still had to have some of the resources available on our side, but we were able to get through all of our interfaces. But we were really just spot checking at that point because there was no way to filter out certain specific fields. You're really using an external tool to do the diff. So you can't say, if our MSH segment has a T for the test environment and in production that's a P, well, I want to ignore that. So how do I do that in a file-based type solution? So you can see our trend is we're starting to do less and less work as a user, but we're starting to allow the server to do more and more work as it goes through.
And part of that is that you've added another namespace.
Yeah.
And we've added some additional testing capabilities for validation.
Yeah, so there's been more. We're obviously, as our environment is growing, we're adding more namespaces, we're adding more just data that's going through our system. So even with added data and added namespaces, we still are cutting the time that our resources are spending, but we're allowing the server to spend more time doing the work instead of the resources doing the time to do the work.
So this is where I always trick the guys. I always throw some slides in that they haven't seen before. so they don't have this on their laptops. But thank you, Kat. Basically, when you really think about it, there's a lot of times being saved. That's money, right? You have these, especially when you were early days, you had to have your senior analyst
Yes.
doing all the checking. And now literally 6 hours and the system does all the checking. Now what I will say is that the production validator is for HL7 messages only, all right? So it's a tool. And I've had people say, oh, we can do our upgrades in 6 hours. No, it's a tool for your HL7 messages. If you're 80% HL7, maybe you can do your upgrade in 15 hours or 20. But it's, this is part of your process.
It also depends on how much you're testing.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
I can tell you, I tested this also, and I had to make a subset namespace just for this because my namespace is so huge that I couldn't do every single file.
Right. And part of the options, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, so I think that's the options we've gotten into is that there are options available to limit not only how much data if you want a subset of your data, like I only want 1 day's worth of data, but now I only want a percentage of that 1 day's worth of data. So you can say I only want 50% of my 1 day that I'm trying to do, which is probably something we're going to end up doing next year because of the amount of data growth that we're seeing in our environment. It just takes a while for the system to churn through all that data because you're taking all of your data and shoving it through a system in one as fast as possible as opposed to over a 24-hour period. So it's going to take some time for that system to handle all that.
Yeah. So the process is pretty straightforward. We're actually going to do a complete demo A to Z on each of these items that we talked about. So I think a lot of times when you have a tool or something that's useful, people are afraid to use it because it's sort of a black box. So you're going to see A to Z on all 3 of these tools. Now, granted, I'm doing it on a very small namespace with very few messages, and so it's going to go very quickly, but the process is the same. I'm doing it exactly the way you would do it. So let's
So these are options you can add. Like I mentioned before, you have your from and to options. You can have your percentage options. If you need to add, pull data from globals because you're storing data in globals as your messages flow through, you can export those as well. If you want to increase the worker jobs or you want to limit the worker jobs so you're not overtaxing your system while you're trying to process all this data because you're still trying to do development work, you can set all those as part of options when you're setting up the global or the production validator.
And the exclude too.
If you want to exclude certain things, you can exclude certain things.
Because there could be some really custom stuff that may not process exactly the way you think. All right, so we're going to go through the process. So keep in mind, as we do this, this is literally, I'm loading the libraries because anything prior to 2025.1 requires that you load the toolkit. 2025.1 will have it.
Yes.
But this will go through the whole process of loading and processing the messages. I didn't re-record this 20 times to make it look like I know what I'm doing. I haven't run the production validator in a year when I ran this. So I wanted you to see what it really looks like, so I just recorded what I did. The one thing that will take some time is actually creating the namespace because it creates a replica of the namespace. So if anyone's created a namespace here, it takes a minute to create one. So we're going to see it.
So this is something that changed, for those of you who may have been here last year, that changed from this last year to this year, was that previously you had to create the namespace on the new system and you had to deploy all your code and move everything. Now, as part of the export process, they grab all the code for you. They grab your namespace. So when you move that database over to the new system and run the configure the namespace, it builds that out for you and you don't have to do any of that stuff. I think the caveat being if you have system defaults that you want to set, you may have to do, I think John did a combined command where it configures the namespace and immediately starts processing the messages. You can split that into 2 commands where it configures the namespace, then you can do any system defaults, any edits you want to do, and then start processing the messages. So
Yeah. So in this case, I actually have two systems that were not 2025.1, so I'm loading the libraries again, just so you see, because a lot of times people won't go to the latest. Sometimes people will upgrade to 2024 as opposed to 2025. So I wanted you to see, you do the same process. You load the messages or the libraries, and then this will create a namespace. So if you guys want to chat for a second.
So this is creating the namespace, loading all your DTLs, all your rules, everything that you had in your production environment. It's setting that up for you. Like I said, I think the only thing it doesn't do is your system defaults.
Right.
So those, if you have anything, I think we have a different validation setting. And if we left it at the default validation setting, it's going to throw a bunch of errors that are not expected. So I have to, that's why I said I can split it up into two commands and I run them separately just so I can set my system defaults. I'm talking with the developers to see if we can streamline that even more, which hopefully by the next version we'll be able to do, get everything in one go and you can really just use this one command and go.
So one of the things that happens in here is there's an error thrown because one of my classes has a dependency, but it has nothing to do with my HL7 messages, so I didn't worry about it. But if I were going live with this, I'd want to go back in and make sure I compile all my classes. So pay attention to the errors, even if you don't have a poor outcome with your testing. I'm trying to see where we are.
Yeah,
it's
I think
too
this
small on this.
I think this is still right, but we can talk about other pieces of this while it's setting up.
Well, it's processing messages.
As you're doing this type of stuff, I mean, John's doing it at an extremely small scale, but that's a good place to start because we've had customers that have tried to start at large scale and they've gotten confused and made mistakes. And if you start at a small scale, you really get a chance to see how it works and walk through each step of the process.
I think that's why, I kept it on a small scale because what I'm doing is testing the different versions, so I at least tried to grab one type of message that was being passed through, one type of HL7 message that was being passed through my system, and at least create that in my smaller testing namespace to do that appropriate test and include the BPLs that John cusses me out for.
Yes.
So.
The BPL from hell, right?
Yeah.
It's a 60-page BPL if you've ever seen one like that. God help you. So I think we're at the messages. It'll be another second. But again, this is the process A to Z. It's exactly what you would do. Obviously, if you're running 3 million messages like Justin is, it's going to take some time. And that's why the processing time was, 5 days?
Yeah.
But your effort time was 6 hours. So, the system's doing all the work for you.
And that's really the key there is we wanted to get to that point where we weren't spending a lot of time. I can continue to do the day-to-day business job that I need to do if I have team members reaching out to me for certain things or I'm on call for whatever project is going on. I can continue to be in those meetings and not dedicate an entire week to doing this process.
Yep.
I can spend one day over a period of a week doing this work.
Yeah. So if you notice, I'm pasting commands in there. The commands I'm pasting in are actually in the documentation. If you go on into the documentation, there's a list of 10 commands or so, and you can paste them in groups. And so I'm basically cutting and pasting. I'm putting my namespace in there because obviously the documentation. But so now it spits out an HTTP address. So we've done the entire process as far as comparison, but we haven't seen the messages. Now, I put this up because I had 0 errors, and I wanted you to see what it actually looks like. This screen is what it looks like when you do the diffs. And there's no one who's done more of this than Justin. He's been doing it for a while.
So you get all these diffs if there's a segment that's missing, if there's fields that are different, you get these type of blue highlighting. You can go then back into the database and say, I want to skip these certain fields because these fields are known differences. Maybe I adjusted my code, maybe, something's different. Once you do your research into what happened with that message, now you can say, I can skip that. I don't need to do that. So once you skip it, you just rerun the diff and it spits out a new report. and those messages are either gone or you get to see just the fields that you haven't ignored yet, and then you can do more further research on.
So like any diff tool, you could skip certain things. All right. So basically, the the issues in terms of journal files or those kinds of things.
Yeah. So it does spin out a lot of journal files. It does increase your CPU, obviously, because like I mentioned before, you're taking a day's worth of data and processing it now, and so it's going to spin as fast as possible. So if you don't limit how many jobs it takes, it's going to grab all the jobs, and your journals are going to start to increase. Your CPU usage and your memory usage is all going to start to increase. Go ahead.
Yeah, the right image journal will also take a big hit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So all of that is something to keep in mind, that you may see some storage growth, you may see some other issues, but as long as you're kind of prepared for that, you're running it on a server that's not your production environment, then you should be all right.
So current state of this is that you can download it right off the WRC software distribution page. You can install it. Which is exactly what I did. So everything you saw me do is after I downloaded this, I just installed it and did everything on this screen that you just saw that you would need to do.
And one thing I just wanted out, just to, I guess, to finish this part, is that depending on the size of your daily volume of messages, so the smaller you are, the better you are, because then you can process many days worth of data. Where if you are a bigger, a big hospital, then you probably, I guess, you only do one day?
So I do one day at a time. So I do multiple days over the course of a week, and I just do an export. So I'll kick it off Sunday night, and I'll grab Saturday's messages. And then when I come in, hopefully on Monday it's done, and then I'll tell it to kick off and grab the next day's worth of messages. And then by the time I get in, on Tuesday, that day is done. But I've worked with other people, I've talked to other people that they can grab 7 days worth of messages at one time and then just do this whole process in a single go. They don't have to do multiple iterations of it.
Okay. Quick Q&A, because we have to go to the next topic. Any questions? Awesome. We'll be on schedule. So, orphan message purge. Does everyone here know what an orphan message is? Yes? Okay. How many of you know what a widow message is? Okay. So, orphans are messages that don't have a header. The way we process messages in InterSystems is that we actually save a message body somewhere, and we have a header that's associated with it, and we pass the header around almost like a token. So it makes it much faster. So if you purge the header but leave the body, you create an orphan. If you delete the class that has the body in it without purging the header, you create a widow, because the header, I don't know why they call it a widow, because you lost a child, not a spouse, but it is called a widow. So you would have a widow. So we worry about the storage of the orphans. We do also report widows that exist within your system. So we check all your classes. So I'm going to let Scott take this over, and he's been working with it lately and did some nice alterations to what was there.
Yeah, if you ever know, like, for example, WRC has code to do just HL7 messages. That process, because it's interactive, can take a long time to run. So this new code not only gets the HL7, but it gets all the other types of message classes too. So, I mean, the purging's on the screen, as you can see, the wasted storage, replication, blah, blah, blah. So John presented me with this code probably back in April. I took a look at it. As a health system, we had already been doing the manual WRC HL7 purging at least once a month. We have a guy that just kicks it off before the weekend and just leaves it running all the time. So looking at John's code, it was much faster, and I actually used it in production too, because we started seeing space issues. So I wanted to see how many orphan messages we had in our production. Right. So John also gave this code to Bay State, who couldn't make it this week, but they ended up having a lot of space issues. And if you can see from the screen, they identified 244 million just in their test environment alone. And they ran the code, they were able to purge, and recover 40% of their storage just by purging. They looked at the CPU, they looked at journals, they looked at, it being single threaded. With this new code, you can run it as a task, so it's non-interactive. You could say, kick it off and have it, run, within milliseconds, depending on how many messages you have. So.
I'm pushing him forward.
Yeah, you're ahead of me. So, again, this is Bay State's, testing, but my testing was sort of the same. When I ran it, because we had been doing it on a monthly basis, there wasn't much purging on the HL7, but I noticed that I had other data classes that had orphan messages.
So one of the things with this is that the older tools, and there's a new one, there's actually a newer one that's pretty similar to this in some ways, and it's fine to use. But when you have, millions of orphans that you need to get off your system, especially if you're in a cloud situation where you're paying for that storage, you want to be able to do it quickly. And if you were using some of the older tools, they don't do it very quickly. You'd have to do it over a long period of time, and it would take significant effort in terms of manual. So we looked at it and said, what do we need to do to make this much more efficient for people to actually use? So this is sort of the goal of what we wanted to do with that new approach.
Again, you see their Bay State's data there, 8 million orphans, 5 terabytes used just on orphans alone. They ran this.
So I actually got a phone call this morning from Bay State. They gave me more data because they're excited. I mean, the bottom line is that we're purging 150 million to 200 million messages a day without it impacting the CPU or the journals. And you have to watch this, and you got to be careful, because I don't know what your system looks like, and every system could be different. But so far, that's single-threaded. We have the capability of being multi-threaded. We estimate, just single-threaded, we could do 4.5 billion a month. So if hopefully you don't have that. And I will tell you, honestly, I've sent this code to different sites. Some sites have hundreds of millions, some sites have 1 billion, some sites have 10. So I can't tell you what you have. It depends on how you write code. It depends on how your integration works. There's all different variations. So we want to make sure that when people go in and look, that they're checking their system before they do anything, because I, again, won't necessarily know how you're integrated. So we don't actually offer the purge to you immediately. We offer you the checking tool so that you can talk to the SE and make sure we're doing the right thing. Sorry.
So there's a couple options.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, when running this, there is a couple options you have to set. The check tool will only run as a report only, and so the report flag would be default of 1. But this code also says you can pick and choose your classes. So say you identify like 3 different message classes, you only want to purge the 1. This allows you to pick and choose what you want to do, and you can pause. You can put milliseconds to seconds if you want to pause to make sure it's not killing your resources on your system. You could also set a max purge count, say you only want 1 million, just do the first 1 million messages that you come across. Same instance there. So when John had originally given me this code, it displayed to the screen, and I'm like, well, that's not the interactive that I want. I want it to be able to run from a task manager. But I also want to see what is it reporting on the messages. So I took John's code, I created a table, and basically have, as the code is as the check is writing, as it's searching, as it's doing its queries, it's writing to this separate table. And then I'm like, okay, so how do I report that back to a user? So I came up with an email format here that basically will send this runs, I have it running weekly right now in my test system, but basically it runs weekly and it just reports on any message, any message
Orphans, yeah.
class that has an orphan message, basically. So it helps you give an idea about what you're looking at, where to go find your orphan messages that could be causing a problem. Also, we're keeping it as a history, so you can see, you can track it over time.
And that's a great point. So, while it's great that we can clean these up and we can clean them up very quickly, it's more important to know why they're getting created, right? Because, yeah, we can clean them up, but if you're creating a ton of, messages in your system accidentally, that may be eating processing time too. So, as these things get identified, we should be doing a little bit of a deep dive into what's actually creating them. So, even though my report's ugly, that's what you're going to see in a second. But it does report quite a few things. So here we go. And again, A to Z, we're going to start with checking the system. So this is going through, it checks all the classes in the dictionaries, and it validates what's in the system. Now, I will not purge a percent class, no matter what. So if it starts with percent, I'm not touching it. The other thing we do is anything that has a message body ID of 1, I immediately ignore. I'm not going to do anything with that because it's never been purged, so there's no point in me looking. And then we have some orphan messages in the green up there where that class has some orphan messages. And then there's a widow record that it reports out there that says, this class may have been deleted, you have only headers, no message bodies. So it's important for you to know that. You've got stuff in your message header table that can never be cleaned unless you have it done. And then I'm trying to see if there's anything else. This is way too small on my screen.
No,
Let me see if I can do that.
think, it's got the message ID.
Okay, yeah. So, that's why we're so fast. So the minimum body ID, what we're doing is we're going in the message header table, and I'm querying it to find out what the oldest body ID that's attached to that class. So then when I'm going into the orphan tables, or the body tables, like if it's HL7 or whatever it is, I'm only querying items that don't have a header. Now, there could be orphans above that, but when you try to purge something that may have a header, you have to do all sorts of checking. That's why the other ones are so slow, because they're checking all sorts of things to make sure they aren't purging something that's in use and so on and so forth, right? So by ignoring that and just saying, anything in your retention time frame, whether it's an orphan or not, I'm going to ignore it. Once it gets past your retention, then I will purge it if it's an orphan, which is a really safe way to do it, and it's really fast. So next, we'll actually run a purge. Now, yeah, it's like 20 messages, but so there it is. Basically, it's the orphans and then the number of messages that are selected and purged.
Right, and we have two classes, right? So one that does the checking,
Yeah,
reports, and then once you're comfortable with the reports,
yeah.
then you can run the actual
Right.
job that
Right. So I basically I made a copy of this program and took out the purge routine because I want you to talk to your sales engineer to make sure that what you're purging is what you want to purge. Because I don't know if you wrote a program where you have message bodies and you're, connecting it to an external database, right? Which I know someone does. So I want you to be able to validate what's in there and that you want to purge it before we ever do it. If you need to, you can then run purges where you say, okay, I only want to purge these message classes, and that way you're safe. So I just want to be careful about how we do this. So, what we've learned.
So, yeah, we know what the issue is. Something's causing an orphan message. The ID check we developed to help show you what you could go be looking at to see where your orphan message problems are. it's a lot faster than the WRC HL7 purge message tool. So, you know, obstacles, how do you keep your clean system forward? I mean, you know, you run that check once a week or once a month, depending on how big you are and how much you think your orphan messages are growing. That could give you an idea of how much you need to really clean up and try to investigate.
Yep. So current state. So the orphan message check's available by request. And honestly, there is a orphan message check or orphan message routine that would check your system for you that's already out on the developer community. And you could use that just to see if you have an issue. But I'm going to publish the checker online so you can get it if you want, and then we can go from there. But either one's fine. The real question is, do you have an issue? And it's worth checking your system to see if you have orphans, and if it's large, then you will want to talk to us about that. All right, that's our current state. Q&A. Any questions? Sure. No, you don't. You're not. The first time you're in. Oh yeah. No, product asked me to do a demo for them. So I wouldn't be shocked that this eventually gets put in. And actually, that's how production validators started. We're a bunch of engineers. We try to make things easier, and occasionally we get the attention of product, and so production validator came from that. And they're talking to us about this, and they're also talking to us about change control, audit, and alerts. I like to call it stealth control. Oh, sorry, question. Go ahead.
On the message purge checker, does that run across namespaces, or do you have to?
Right now, it's only the one. It would be fairly easy to go across namespaces, but right now, a lot of stuff we do is proof of concept. Can we make this better? Can we make this faster? Yeah, but you know, you could easily do that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have another question, but like outside of obviously the purging you guys did with this, like, did you come up with any tools to identify why your contributing cause?
Yeah, so we looked at Bay State, we looked at the globals, and we looked at a lot of different things. In their case, I know part of why it was being created, but we certainly don't know everything. You have to dig into it a little bit and see where they're coming from.
I don't think there is a tool to be able to identify what's causing the problem.
Yeah.
I know, you know, after last global summit, I went through and I do a lot of VPLs, and I went through and tried to clean up a lot of them because I knew they could be problematic. Same with, you know, we've always stressed to our team, if you have a message, send it somewhere. If you're not sending it anywhere, then
Don't make it, yeah.
Then don't do it. So,
But I also think that's the point of engaging your sales engineer
Right.
before you do the purging,
Yeah.
because then you can have that conversation about how do we research these, how do we dig in deeper, because when we've found them in the past, that's who I reached out to John and we had a conversation about how do I get the information that will tell me where these are getting created from, and they don't make it easy on you.
Okay, we're going to move along. Sorry, I knew this was going to be hard to do in this time.
When you delete the message header, there's no key way to get into it. So,
Okay, so change control. So just brief background. A lot of people are moving to VS Code. A lot of people are moving to Git, and we're seeing that a lot of interface analysts aren't programmers. And so working with Git or doing merges or whatever, we've had people blow away productions. We've had people blow away some of their code. So this happened a year and a half ago to me with one of my customers, and I'm like, this is crazy. We have to have some way of knowing what happened and who did what and what was removed, right? We need to know that, because I don't know what branch was added or what happened, right? So that's how this started.
Right, yeah.
Julio.
So the history is, everything started with a custom code to pretty much export your DTL, lookup tables, schemas, rules, and again, then you had to take it outside, right, to an external server, do your own comparison, You know, most people, they did a daily export, and then the next day in the morning, they will compare with prior day and then see the differences. Of course, you know, back then, we didn't have a way to get production information, you know,
Right.
items and settings for your productions. And again, it was something that was external
So,
out of IRIS.
so I'm going to say something. So this was probably 10 years ago when I wrote this for Hopkins, and then Justin took it to the next level and started adding some things, and it got a little bit better. And then Julio saw it, what, 4 years ago?
3 years ago.
Okay. And he came to the Global Summit. He goes, look what I did. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because I was blown away, and that's why we went to the next step. So.
Right, and this is just an example of the tool I put together. You know, things that I said, all right, we don't have this in IRIS, so I'm gonna do it my way. You know, using those export codes. You know, I brought all these classes, DTLs, rules. I export it every day to a scheduled task. You know, bring it into my development server, and then through SFTP interfaces, I load it into my SQL tables, and you know, to display on the tool. And you know, since I'm getting all this information from you know, my release environment, my production environment, now I can report on, you know, when something is being created. You know, I know, you know, when something is being created, something is getting deleted. Like as of now, if someone deletes something accidentally in IRIS, I mean, how we know? There is no way to know unless, you know, you're constantly checking the audit logs, but, you know, who does that?
I'm switching.
Again, the idea is just to have some way of tracking, you know, these items. Like in this screen here, this is, you know, I have the data from both environments, so now I can compare a service and see, you know, what are the difference between the two environments in terms of the settings. And the same here with the code, you know, with the classes. In this case, this rule, you know, I run a diff on the server, and then I load the diff into the database so I can report on, you know, where are my changes right now between production and release. So this is just, again, this is an external tool. It's nice and everything, but this is happening outside of IRIS.
And once a day, right?
Right, once a day. So I'm always like 1 day behind, and you know, a lot of moving parts. So I had, you know, store procedures. You know, a lot of interfaces to move the file. I'm doing the files every single day. I'm moving all the files out of the servers, and you know, a lot of moving parts.
So from this, I started thinking, and along with
exactly.
Julio too, is why are we exporting data from a database to a database, right? It makes no sense. So,
yeah, the question was, can we do this in IRIS
Right.
itself? You know, why do we have to do all this outside when, you know, we already have the data in IRIS, and, you know, we can do the same thing there. And that's how the idea of this tool came about.
yeah. And so we started thinking about going, well, the reason, and Justin was doing this, I think you were doing something similar, Johns Hopkins was doing this, and it was daily. Like they come in the morning and go, oh, something changed. So we were thinking about it like, well, we have the audit, we have the ability to check classes, we can store classes. Why can't we do this real time?
Right.
So.
And again, the idea here, the main key here, I mean, there are many good ideas here, but the main idea is that when something changes in your environment, you know right away, you know, especially when someone accidentally, you know, thinks he's editing something in development, but, you know, he's making the change in production, and then it creates a problem.
Yeah, the adding and deleting, all that stuff shows up here, whether it's a business host or a class, whether it's a business rule, a DTL, it doesn't matter. We're capturing it.
Right.
And if you look at those, it will say edited by, deleted by, and it shows you when it happened and who did it.
Right, so this is just an example of the alert that is, so we have a service that constantly checks this table that, well, let me start it this way. So the process, which you schedule it through a scheduled task, it writes to a table, and then from that table, you have a service that queries the table and sends the notification.
So I'm going to go through a real quick process so you can actually see this send the emails and see as I edit. So here we go. Yep. So I'm deleting a business host item. And then I'm going to edit just something, a setting, just editing a setting, right? I'm getting rid of the category, and I apply that. And again, I didn't short time this or anything. This is really happening. And then we wait a second. And the email shows up. Dun, 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 dun. Talks amongst yourselves. It takes a second. I wasn't in the office when the email was being sent.
So you could schedule this to run, I don't know if, John, you have this on your slides, but you can schedule this to run as often or as, you can run it daily, you can run it. I have it in my dev server, I had it running every 5 minutes, I think.
There you
go. Just checking, or every 2 minutes actually, just to check. So I was constantly getting emails as my developers were making changes in the dev server.
And
Now,
you don't.
one second. This is Visual Studio, right? So no, yeah, we're doing our Studio, right? I wanted to show you. I'm going to edit a class in Studio, and I'm going to edit one in VS Code. It makes no difference because I'm checking our dictionaries. So I don't care where you did this, if it was Git or Studio or you imported it, it makes no difference to me. I'm going to check it. So, sorry.
I mean, I hadn't set up the alerting yet, but I do have it. I do have the code checker running. I mean, think about the time that you spend. Like for us, when we make a code change, we have to put it in, and then we have to go into SharePoint for our auditing, and we have to write it out for our auditing, so they know that something changed, so the whole team knows.
So there's the email.
Sorry. This saves that. I mean, we have on my team, we only have a few of us that use VS Code. We have the majority of us go through the management portal, so it's hard to track changes that both of us are doing. So this is a good tool for auditing.
Yeah, and
So now you've seen the alerting. Now we're going to talk about what it's actually doing and why it's so useful in the back end. So
right, yeah. So another feature about this tool is that every time your code changes, it saves a copy of it. And then you have, in this case, this screen, you can see we have old versions of this class called Custom Code Tracker. And the first line here, this is the current code that you have right now in production, in your environment, whatever that is. And then the second row here, ID 396, that will be your previous version of the code. But if you notice on the code column, that will be your whole.
that's actually the code. That is a global stream. It's the entire code.
Right.
So that leads to this. We have like 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah, so because you have this, you can always, of course, retrieve if someone deletes a code accidentally, or you want to recover a code that was deleted. You can go back and search for that code. And this could be very useful if you are troubleshooting. You can actually go back in time and set, which code was active at this time, all right? And you can, pretty much play with a query and specify the code that you want to look for.
And this is new. He hadn't seen this yet. So, and then we get to the comparison, right? So what if I take it from all my different namespaces and drop it into the same namespace, and now I can compare my instances against namespaces? Are they out of sync? Do I need to be able to move a version of code? Why are they behaving differently? So you can actually, there's a hash on all these. So I'm comparing hashes between namespaces and instances, and I can look at it and go, this one's out of sync. Now, I haven't written the web app, sorry. I'm not very good at that. But we really have the underlying data that you were using for your GUI. So basically, within your system, and like I said, I like to call it stealth control, you don't have to check anything out. You don't have to check it in. You aren't doing anything different. You just do your coding. You just do it the way you would normally do it. And it keeps track of it, and it notifies someone, hey, production just changed with these 10 classes. Does that match your change control? And if it doesn't, you know something went wrong. So let's see. Oh, the last one is there's an error report too, because I'm checking the dictionary, so I put a flag in there to do an error report so you can see what classes are in there that maybe have problems. So it's just an optional flag that you can run if you wanted to see what else is in your dictionary that might need some work. And in my case, I need a lot of work. So current state, we're currently testing. How long have you been running it?
I've been running it on our dev server for about a year. I put it in our test environment. When did you give us the most recent version? Like 2 months ago?
Probably yesterday.
maybe a month or two. I put it in our test environment. I want to put it in our production environment, but I haven't rolled it up yet. So.
Yeah. So, hopefully these kinds of things will save you some time. Any questions? We're out of time. One question. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Well, I have an idea, but I
concept of it.
Yeah, so concept of a plan. I have been talking to product. I just literally talked to the head of HealthShare, and he's like, "What are you doing these days?" He said, "I want that. So, just like a production validator, we sort of build tools, and if they're useful enough, they wind up either in a kit or part of product. And in this case, I think this is a no-brainer for people who are, especially if you don't have programmers who are doing your interfaces. It's hard to get, how many branches would you get? You told me you're gonna have to have like 200 branches if you did it the way you do it.
Yeah, well, so we have 30 developers on our team, and
Right,
if I had 30 developers doing a branch for every time they're making a change, it's gonna be a lot of branches, 200-300 branches, and you can't delete them after you do that merged into test. You have to save it so you can merge that into production and do some various things.
And I'm not to say, I'm not trying to sell this as source control. It is not. It is, that's why I call it stealth control, because in the background, it's recording everything so that you could, if you wanted to, export or recover. And maybe if we put a web app on top, maybe you can say, can you make my production match that, and move it over. But we haven't gotten to that point. We're sort of in that concept, cycle, if you will. But hopefully these things will help you. And with that, I wanted to acknowledge James Barrett, who did an unbelievable job writing Production Validator, rewriting it, I should say, because he saw our presentation like 4 years ago and had something in the works, and he was the real coder behind the current Production Validator, coming from all of us doing different things. And then the slides I'm sure you've all seen. And if you want to do feedback, it would be appreciated. Here we go. That's just basically it. That's where we are. If you have questions or if you want to participate in some of these things, let us know. So that's it.